Who were the ancient Sumerians, and where did they come from? For centuries, historians and archaeologists have debated the origins of this mysterious civilization that emerged over 6,000 years ago in Mesopotamia. Some theories suggest they were migrants from distant lands, while others believe they were indigenous to the region. But now, cutting-edge genetic research is finally uncovering the truth, and the findings are nothing short of astonishing. The Sumerians are often credited with shaping the foundation of human civilization. They built massive cities, developed one of the first writing systems, and pioneered advances in mathematics, law, and agriculture. But their identity has always been shrouded in mystery. Unlike their neighbors, the Akkadians and Babylonians, who spoke Semitic languages, the Sumerians spoke an isolated language, unrelated to any known linguistic family. This linguistic anomaly led many to believe they were a foreign people who migrated to Mesopotamia. However, ancient Sumerian texts tell a different story, one where their cities, such as Eridu, Ur, and Uruk, were established under divine guidance, tracing their origins to the very land they cultivated. The real breakthrough in solving this mystery comes from genetic studies. Scientists have analyzed the DNA of the Marsh Arabs, a population living in the Mesopotamian marshlands, who are believed to be the closest living descendants of the Sumerians. By examining their Y chromosome and mitochondrial DNA, researchers have traced their genetic roots deep into the Middle East. The results show that the Sumerians were overwhelmingly of indigenous Mesopotamian origin, with no significant genetic links to South Asia, India, or the Indus Valley civilization. This finding directly challenges older theories suggesting that the Sumerians migrated from regions like modern-day Pakistan or Iran. One of the most fascinating genetic markers found in Marsh Arabs is the J1 page 08 Y chromosome lineage, which shows a local expansion around 4,000 years ago. This timeline coincides perfectly with the rise of Sumerian city-states, suggesting a strong, continuous genetic presence in the region. This means that the ancestors of the Sumerians were not outsiders who arrived from a distant land but were part of an evolving civilization that thrived along the Tigris and Euphrates for thousands of years. But if the Sumerians were truly indigenous, why did they seem so different from their neighbors? The answer may lie in their early development of urban societies and advanced agricultural techniques. Unlike the surrounding nomadic tribes, the Sumerians settled in one place, cultivating land and building cities that eventually became cultural and technological powerhouses. This societal structure may have isolated their language and traditions, making them appear distinct from other groups in the region. The discovery of their genetic roots does more than just confirm their origins. It connects the dots between the ancient world and the present day. It proves that the bloodline of one of humanity's first great civilizations still runs through the veins of people living in the marshes of southern Iraq today. The mystery of the Sumerians' origin is no longer just a historical question. It is a story written in the DNA of their descendants, waiting to be read. Over 6,000 years ago, in the land between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, a civilization emerged that would change the course of human history. The Sumerians built the world's first great cities, pioneered advanced agriculture, and developed writing systems that would influence generations to come. But how did they rise to such greatness? What set them apart from the rest of the ancient world? The region of Mesopotamia, often called the cradle of civilization, was both a blessing and a challenge for early settlers. The floodplains provided fertile soil, but the unpredictable nature of the rivers required innovation. The Sumerians mastered irrigation, constructing canals and reservoirs to control the water supply and sustain their crops. This surplus of food allowed for population growth, specialization of labor, and the development of complex societies. Unlike nomadic tribes, Sumerians settled in permanent cities, each with its own ruler, government, and temple at its center. The earliest of these cities, Eridu, was founded around 5400 BCE and held deep religious significance. The Sumerians believed it was the first city created by the gods, and its temples were rebuilt over centuries, layer upon layer, marking its enduring importance. But Eridu was only the beginning. Over time, more cities rose: Uruk, Ur, Lagash, and Kish, each one contributing to the rapid advancement of civilization. By 3100 BCE, Uruk had become the largest city in the world, with a population of nearly 80,000 people at a time when the entire human population was only around 15 million. One of the Sumerians' most remarkable achievements was the invention of cuneiform writing. Initially developed for record-keeping in trade and agriculture, it soon evolved into a tool for storytelling, law, and education. The Epic of Gilgamesh, one of the earliest known literary works, was written in this script, preserving the myths, history, and beliefs of the Sumerians for future generations. But with great advancements came challenges. As cities expanded, competition for resources led to conflicts between city-states. Kings emerged as powerful rulers, often claiming divine authority to justify their rule. Despite the wars and rivalries, Sumer remained a beacon of innovation, influencing neighboring civilizations like the Akkadians, Babylonians, and Assyrians. The rise of Sumer was not just the birth of a civilization, it was the dawn of human progress. Their contributions to agriculture, governance, writing, and architecture laid the foundation for the world we live in today. And while their empire eventually faded, their legacy continues to shape history. For centuries, the origins of the Sumerians remained one of history's greatest unsolved mysteries. Were they native to Mesopotamia, or did they migrate from a distant land? Historians, archaeologists, and linguists debated the possibilities. But now, cutting-edge genetic research has finally provided answers. The study of ancient DNA has uncovered surprising details about the Sumerians' true ancestry, rewriting what we thought we knew about this remarkable civilization. To trace the genetic lineage of the Sumerians, researchers turned to the Marsh Arabs, a population living in the Mesopotamian marshlands of southern Iraq. These people have long been considered the closest living descendants of the Sumerians due to their way of life, which has remained largely unchanged for thousands of years. By analyzing both Y-chromosome DNA, which is passed down through the male line, and mitochondrial DNA, mtDNA, inherited through the mother, scientists were able to reconstruct the genetic history of this region. The results revealed a dominant Middle Eastern genetic component, suggesting that the Sumerians were indigenous to Mesopotamia rather than migrants from another region. The study found that the Y-chromosome lineage J1 page 08, a haplogroup strongly associated with the Arabian Peninsula and the Middle East, showed a significant local expansion around 4,000 years ago, coinciding with the peak of the Sumerian civilization. This means that rather than being invaders or outsiders, the Sumerians likely evolved as part of the native Mesopotamian population. Mitochondrial DNA analysis also supports this theory. While there were minor genetic influences from South Asia and Africa, they were not significant enough to suggest mass migration or large-scale intermixing. This effectively rules out the theory that the Sumerians came from the Indus Valley or any other distant civilization. Instead, their genetic makeup aligns closely with other ancient Middle Eastern populations, reinforcing the idea that they were deeply rooted in the land where their civilization flourished. But what about the theory that they descended from mountain tribes in the northeast, such as the Zagros Mountains? Genetic data suggests that while some northern Mesopotamian influences existed, they were minimal compared to the dominant southern Mesopotamian gene pool. This means that while trade and cultural exchange may have occurred, it did not significantly impact the Sumerian genetic identity. These findings have major implications. The Sumerians were not a mysterious foreign group. They were a people who had lived in Mesopotamia for thousands of years, gradually developing the first great civilization known to history. The Marsh Arabs, despite centuries of cultural change, still carry the genetic legacy of their ancestors, making them living proof of the Sumerians' enduring presence. Genetics has done what history alone could not. It has provided a clear and scientific answer to one of the world's most enduring questions. The origins of the Sumerians are no longer a mystery. They are embedded in the very DNA of the land they once ruled. For centuries, scholars have debated where the Sumerians came from. Their language was unlike any other in the region. Their culture was advanced beyond their time, and their cities seemed to emerge almost overnight. Some believed they migrated from the distant Indus Valley, while others thought they descended from the mountains of the northeast. But now, modern genetic research has finally provided answers, separating myths from reality. One of the most popular theories suggested that the Sumerians came from South Asia, possibly the Indus Valley civilization. This idea stemmed from trade links between Mesopotamia and the Indus region, as well as similarities in certain cultural aspects, such as water management and city planning. However, DNA analysis has debunked this theory. While minor South Asian genetic markers exist in Mesopotamian populations, they are not strong enough to suggest large-scale migration. The Sumerians were not settlers from the Indus Valley. They were already in Mesopotamia long before these trade routes flourished. Another theory claimed that the Sumerians descended from the northeastern mountains, such as the Zagros region. Some believed they migrated down into Mesopotamia, bringing advanced agricultural techniques and knowledge. However, genetic evidence shows little northern influence in the Sumerian gene pool. While some cultural exchange likely occurred, the dominant genetic markers found in Marsh Arabs, a population considered the closest descendants of the Sumerians, indicate a strong local Mesopotamian ancestry. The most scientifically supported theory is that the Sumerians were indigenous to Mesopotamia. Y chromosome analysis has revealed a strong presence of J1 page 08, a haplogroup that expanded in the region around 4,000 years ago, aligning perfectly with the rise of the Sumerian city-states. Mitochondrial DNA also confirms a deep-rooted Middle Eastern origin, with no significant outside influence. This means the Sumerians were not migrants but an ancient population that evolved within Mesopotamia itself, developing their civilization over thousands of years. The debate about the origins of the Sumerians lasted for centuries, fueled by linguistic mysteries and cultural anomalies. But thanks to modern genetics, we now have a definitive answer. The Sumerians were not from India, not from Central Asia, and not from the northern mountains. They were native to the land they built their civilization upon. Their legacy is still alive today in the people of southern Iraq, whose DNA holds the secrets of one of history's greatest civilizations. The Sumerians were pioneers in trade, culture, and technology. But one of their most fascinating obsessions was with a single, deep blue stone, lapis lazuli. They adorned their temples, jewelry, and statues with this rare mineral, believing it to be the material of the gods. But what makes this so significant? Lapis lazuli was not found in Mesopotamia. It had to be imported from a distant land, and this has led some to speculate whether the Sumerians had origins far beyond the Tigris and Euphrates. Could their deep connection to this stone reveal something about where they truly came from? The only known source of high-quality lapis lazuli in the ancient world was the Sare Sang mines in the Hindu Kush mountains of Afghanistan. This means that, as early as 3000 BCE, Sumerians had already established long-distance trade networks stretching over 1,000 miles. Some scholars have argued that this trade connection might suggest a migration link between Central Asia and Mesopotamia, proposing that the Sumerians originally came from the east before settling in Mesopotamia. However, genetic research tells a different story. While the Sumerians were deeply connected to the Afghanistan region through trade, DNA evidence does not support a direct ancestral link between the two civilizations. The genetic markers found in modern-day Marsh Arabs, the closest living descendants of the Sumerians, do not show a strong South or Central Asian influence. This suggests that while the Sumerians imported goods from the Hindu Kush, they did not originate from there. Instead, their use of lapis lazuli was part of a flourishing trade system rather than evidence of their migration. Lapis lazuli also played a spiritual role in Sumerian mythology. The gods' celestial palaces were believed to be made of lapis, and it was often associated with divinity and power. This symbolism continued into later civilizations, including the Egyptians, who also revered the stone. But the connection to lapis was not because the Sumerians came from Afghanistan. It was because they saw its deep blue color, streaked with gold, as a representation of the heavens and the cosmos. The evidence is clear. The Sumerians did not migrate from Central Asia. Their fascination with lapis lazuli was a reflection of their advanced trade networks and religious beliefs, not their genetic origins. The stone may have come from Afghanistan, but the people who cherished it were deeply rooted in the land of Mesopotamia. The Sumerians were not only brilliant engineers and city builders but also master storytellers. Their myths and legends, written in cuneiform on clay tablets, have influenced cultures for thousands of years. But one story stands out, a tale of a catastrophic flood that wiped out humanity. Eerily similar to the biblical story of Noah's Ark known as the Eridu Genesis, this ancient Sumerian flood myth raises an important question. Was this just a religious tale, or is there scientific evidence behind it? The Eridu Genesis tells of a time when the gods created humans to work and serve them. But as the population grew, humans became too noisy, disturbing the gods. Enlil, the chief deity, decided to destroy humanity with a great flood. However, the god Enki, the Sumerian god of wisdom, secretly warned a mortal man named Zeusudra, instructing him to build a massive boat to save himself, his family, and animals from the impending disaster. When the waters finally receded, Ziusudra made an offering to the gods, and as a reward, he was granted eternal life. This story, which predates the biblical account of Noah's Ark by more than 1,000 years, suggests that the idea of a great flood was deeply rooted in Mesopotamian history. But was this event purely mythological, or did a real flood inspire these legends? Geological and archaeological evidence suggests that catastrophic flooding did occur in Mesopotamia thousands of years ago. The Tigris and Euphrates rivers, which were central to Sumerian civilization, were prone to massive floods. Excavations at ancient Sumerian cities such as Ur and Kish have uncovered thick layers of silt and mud, indicating that a major flood covered large parts of Mesopotamia around 2900 BCE. This aligns closely with the timeline of the Eridu Genesis and could explain why flood myths became a key part of Sumerian belief systems. But what caused such a flood? Some scientists believe that melting glacier and rising sea levels at the end of the last ice age may have led to periodic flooding in the region. Others suggest that shifting river courses and intense rainfall could have triggered massive surges of water, overwhelming Sumerian settlements. Unlike a global flood, as described in later religious texts, the Sumerian flood was likely a localized but devastating event, which the survivors immortalized through myth. The similarities between the Eridu Genesis and later flood stories, including the biblical tale of Noah and the Epic of Gilgamesh, suggest that the Sumerian version was the original source of this widespread legend. As civilizations interacted and exchanged stories, the flood myth evolved, adapting to different cultures and religions over time. So, was the Sumerian flood story real? In a way, yes. While the gods and divine interventions may have been symbolic, the scientific evidence confirms that major floods did reshape Mesopotamia, leaving a lasting impact on the people who lived there. What began as a historical event became a legend, passed down through generations, eventually influencing some of the most famous religious texts in history. The Sumerians were pioneers in many aspects of civilization, but what can their genetics tell us about their society? Modern DNA analysis has not only revealed their origins but has also uncovered fascinating details about how gender roles shaped their genetic structure. From social traditions to marriage practices, the genetic makeup of the Sumerians provides a rare glimpse into how their society functioned beyond what ancient texts reveal. One of the most striking findings from DNA research is the high degree of male genetic homogeneity in the Sumerian population. This means that the Y chromosome lineages, which are passed from father to son, were highly concentrated within a few dominant male lineages. In contrast, mitochondrial DNA, which is inherited from the mother, showed more diversity. This suggests that while Sumerian men largely descended from a stable, localized population, women may have come from a wider geographical range. The most logical explanation for this pattern lies in Sumerian marriage customs and social structure. Sumerian society was strongly patrilocal, meaning that men remained in their birthplaces while women moved in from other regions after marriage. This practice was common in ancient Mesopotamian societies, where family lines and inheritance were passed through the male lineage. Additionally, polygamy among the elite and ruling class may have contributed to the concentration of specific Y chromosome lineages over generations. Another fascinating aspect of the Sumerian genetic structure is the relative absence of outside male influences. Unlike later civilizations that saw constant invasions and mixing of warrior classes, the Sumerians had a more stable and isolated genetic pool. This means that their ruling families and leading societal figures were likely part of long-established bloodlines, maintaining power through inheritance rather than conquest. This genetic pattern aligns well with historical records. Sumerian kingship was often hereditary, passed down from father to son. Ancient texts also mention marriages between ruling families of different city-states, which may explain the presence of some genetic diversity in maternal lineages. However, unlike societies that were frequently overrun by foreign invaders, the Sumerians appear to have preserved a strong and continuous male lineage for much of their civilization's history. Genetic research has confirmed that the Sumerians were not just a mix of various migrating groups. They were a deeply rooted, structured society where gender roles influenced population genetics. Their patrilocal traditions, royal bloodlines, and social customs all played a role in shaping their civilization's stability and longevity. And while their empire eventually faded, Their DNA continues to tell the untold stories of a society that laid the foundations for much of human civilization. For centuries, the origins of the Sumerians remained one of history's most perplexing mysteries. Their language was unlike any other. Their cities emerged seemingly out of nowhere, and their culture laid the foundation for future civilizations. Were they an isolated group native to Mesopotamia, or did they migrate from a distant land? After years of speculation, modern science has finally uncovered the truth. Genetic studies have now confirmed that the Sumerians were not an outside group that arrived in Mesopotamia from the Indus Valley, Central Asia, or the Zagros Mountains. The strongest genetic link connects them directly to indigenous Middle Eastern populations, particularly those of Mesopotamia. DNA analysis of the Marsh Arabs, considered to be the closest living descendants of the Sumerians, has revealed a high frequency of the J1 page 08 Y chromosome haplogroup, which expanded in Mesopotamia around 4,000 years ago. This timeline perfectly matches the rise of the Sumerian city-states, proving that they were a civilization that developed from within the region, not from outside migration. Mitochondrial DNA findings further support this, showing that maternal lineages were more diverse, likely due to patrilocal customs where men stayed in their ancestral lands while women were brought in from neighboring regions. However, even this maternal diversity does not indicate large-scale migration, only local integration. This effectively debunks theories suggesting a mass movement from South Asia or other distant areas. The lack of foreign genetic markers in Sumerian DNA also explains why their language was an isolate, unrelated to neighboring Semitic or Indo-European tongues. Their genetic stability over generations meant they had fewer external influences, allowing their linguistic and cultural traditions to remain distinct. While trade networks stretched as far as the Indus Valley and Afghanistan, and cultural exchanges undoubtedly took place, the Sumerians themselves were firmly rooted in Mesopotamia. Their innovations in agriculture, city building, writing, and governance were not the result of external influence but of internal development. The final verdict is clear. The Sumerians were indigenous to Mesopotamia. The myths of migration have been replaced with scientific evidence, proving that this civilization was born, thrived, and declined all within the lands of present-day Iraq. Their DNA still survives in the people of the region, a lasting testament to one of humanity's first great societies.